we're going to have a panel discussion. Actually, we're going to have each one of the presenters, we're going to ask them a question, ask them to tell us more about sometimes the associations that they're working with, some of the issues that they're working with. So we're going to start with Dr. Linda Bluestein. And the question we have for her is, what could be done to educate and encourage healthcare providers to provide more services for those with EDS and associated conditions? You're on.
Okay, great. So first I would like to say that it can be very helpful to try to take the perspective of the provider. So these are not simple, straightforward cases. Each person that has EDS and related disorders is usually very, very complex. And this is not a, one visit and your problem is gone kind of a thing. It is an ongoing, lifelong situation. And for any chronic medical problem, it really requires a very close relationship with the healthcare providers that you are working with, and you really want that to be a very collaborative relationship. So you really want to make it easy for them to help you. So there are some ways that you can make it easier for your healthcare team. You can make it easier for them to help you. So for example, one thing that you can do is you can bring to them concise, credible information. So concise is very important. Keep in mind that you have a lot more time to research your particular medical problems than they do. Most providers are very, very busy. They are working full-time jobs. They also have their own lives and things like that. So if you bring in pages and pages and pages of information, they're probably not going to have the time or energy to get through all that. But if you bring in one article that really has some very good points, or kind of a summary of a few things, that can be very, very helpful. So keep it concise, keep your expectations realistic, and how you make your request is also very important. So you want to make them feel like they can really gain in terms of gaining your trust. Trust is extremely important in the doctor-patient relationship, and so you want to let them know that if they would be willing to read this information or look at these websites, that would be something that you would greatly appreciate, and you can gently point out that this may help them with other cases as well. Now be a little bit careful, because as you know, a lot of us can get rather defensive, and so you want to make sure that you're on the side of being helpful and not being overly critical. To this end, I have been working on an article with Dr. Pradeep Chopra on the management of patients with EDS and related disorders that are having surgery, because time is critically important when in the operating room suite. The per minute of OR time is extremely, extremely expensive. So as an anesthesiologist, when I would be interviewing patients between surgeries, this is a process that has to be expedited, and we only have a certain amount of time to go through your history. So what I did following the Masterminds conference in Colorado in March, Dr. Chopra and I together had created a letter that that I had been providing to my patients, that patients could then bring to their surgical appointment, that would give information to the anesthesiologist and the surgical team, the OR team, what certain precautions were. And as I was at this Masterminds conference and talking to some of my colleagues, I realized that even a letter, it was only maybe 2 or 3 pages, but a letter is a lot harder to read than something like this. So I came home from that conference and I developed this anesthesia surgery alert card that are in the packets that everyone should have received today. And I've been passing these out at any events that I've been speaking at. And there's a place to put your name and date of birth on the card. And keep in mind, this is generic. This is just some information for the anesthesia and surgery team so that they would know, well, what are some of the common things? For example, I didn't know 5 or 10 years ago, I would not have known that when someone is under general anesthesia and you reposition them, you need to be very careful about the risk of dislocations or subluxations. So these are things that are applicable to a lot of people. If you would like to use these cards, I recommend that you highlight or circle items that you know are particularly pertinent to you, because again, remember, anything that you can do to make it easier for people to take care of you is a win-win. So try to always think about that, creating a win-win. The other thing that I wanted to mention about that is that it is a good idea to keep a one-page summary about your medical health and keep that updated. So, just have the high points on there, and every so often go back and review that and make sure, are these still the most pertinent things? One page that can be really hugely beneficial to have something like that you can take, you can keep on your possession. You can keep a shorter version in your wallet in addition to this, which this is good for emergencies also, emergency room care, and that's it, I
Great.
think. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrea, you've been the support group leader for the Dayton group, and it's evolved over the years. Tell us of a situation where there's been a significant impact or maybe results from your interaction with maybe a family or a child, or maybe there's a couple of situations you'd like to share with us.
I feel like everybody that is part of the support group has gotten some form of support and benefit, I suppose, from being a part of the support group. For myself personally, and I'll share a couple of stories, but for myself personally, for me it was just that, and Kendra actually touched on this a little bit, I had spent my whole life being, she's lying, or she's over exaggerating, or the story. And so starting a support group was very healing for me because I was able to show that support to other people. And so I was able to, look at a teenager and say, yeah, I get that. I totally understand. I know that your knees are hurting. I get it. And it almost validated, I suppose, all these years of guessing and wondering and, seeing psychologists and being told different things and being prescribed medications I probably didn't need and didn't work because I didn't need them. So it's validating, that I went through all of that for a purpose. And, so running the support group really gave me purpose again. And I was at a place at that time in my life where I was in a neuro rehab for multiple years. I was wheeled into this rehab post spine surgery. And to have come from that to being able to support other people, it was huge. That it made a huge impact in my life, and it really helped me to get better. It gave me something to look forward to. It gave me people to help. It honestly got my mind off of myself and onto other people. And I came a long way, and I really feel like the support group helped me as much as the rehab center did. Now, obviously, they helped put me back together physically, but the support group really helped put me back together mentally, I feel. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that over and over in people that are part of the support group. Friendships get built where, we have these there are people with EDS that are very lonely and that kind of board themselves up in their homes because they're alone and nobody understands. So to give them even one other person that they can connect with can pull them out of their home and give them reason to leave again, just to have somebody, they've found somebody that has something in common with them. And it could be big things like, PTSD from not being heard as a child, or something simple like my hip clicks when I walk down the street. And, something funny to laugh at, it's good to be able to, have friends and somebody to laugh with. And so people that come into a support group, even if they connect with one person, then they're being helped and their life is going to improve. it will bring them out of a home. It will, there are people that, even on my leadership team, there's a woman on our leadership team now who was just diagnosed a couple of years ago, but the moment she was diagnosed and the moment that we met, it was the light that clicked. Everything, the light went off, everything clicked, everything made sense for the first time in her life. And she was adopted, so she didn't even have family members to watch go through these things. And so this was all completely new to her. And to watch her blossom and grow and just kind of grab onto things and really understand and really dive into helping other people. She's my backup. She really is my right hand right now. Whenever I can't do something, I can call her, and she's right on it. Always willing to help, always ready to go. And the support group, I think, has done for her what it did for me, and it gave me friends and family that I'd never had before, and it gave me something to look forward to. And I feel like it does that for everyone if they're willing and open to new things and seeing new people. Even and I hate to step on the online, but even in the Facebook group, there are friendships developing between people that have never seen each other, but they have something in common with somebody that they can private message with, they start text messaging with, and it just gives them relationship, and that is so vitally important to healing in our health in general. And so I feel like, it's not just an EDS thing, it's not just, dysautonomia or whatever. Support groups in general should be that open and inviting place where friendships can really develop.
Great.
Did that
Thank you,
answer the
Andrea.
question? I don't know. Okay.
I think you answered the question very thoroughly.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Maria, you were talking about organizing and managing Facebook and social media, which is really a critical topic that we need to do a better job. You pointed out some of the areas that really need to be improved. So what do you feel is a major impact of these programs on your members with mast cell activation syndrome, which is one area that you're specializing?
Sure. I exist in the rare disease world both virtually and run an in-person support group, and now as a patient organization. And I can honestly say without Facebook, my group would not have grown to what it did. Facebook can reach, social media in general can reach people in rural locations, patients that cannot get out of bed, and it enables people to make connections, and maybe after a year, they'll learn from other people and they'll slowly get better. And then the first time they actually show up at the in-person meeting, you already feel like you're best friends. And you're just so excited that they're there and they made it and they're getting better. And that, to me, that's the biggest impact, that social media allows you to reach more people, people that you would never have reached to begin with. In my work, it's just been so humbling to learn from everybody and hear everybody's stories. All of these different diseases are spectrum disorders, and to validate that even if you can still work or you're in bed, that we're all in this together and we all have something to learn from each other, no matter what race, what walk of life, what income level, what education level. Disease levels the playing field. We're all in this together. And just the thing with social media that I just really want to stress is how important it is. If you set up a forum for patients to share and exist together, you just have such a big responsibility to keep everybody safe. And one thing that I left out of my presentation that I was like, dang it. I know of 2 groups that exist right now that their sole purpose is to follow the actions of a patient, because for some reason, these people believe that it's their duty to prove that this person's a fake or a phony or not sick. And to me, that's a big failure on the admins of those groups that allowed that patient to be so visual and so vocal and so disruptive, or just share so much of their story that other users became so invested in this person that they thought it was appropriate to start another group. So just big responsibility, whether you're a support group leader in a person meeting or a virtual situation, to keep people safe.
Thank you, Maria. We are so pleased to have Mandy here, and we're going to give her a tough question.
What's the meaning of life?
Well, Mandy, as the ambassador of the No Barriers, you've had experience with those who have major disabilities. In fact, we talked about many EDSers that have approached you and said, hey, I have EDS too. And they were really enlightened that you were out there and doing the things that you're doing. So tell us more about those experiences that can relate to the EDS leadership programs we've been talking about, or how maybe things that we could do better to be able to help our EDS community.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot in there. Part of it is hitting on all of these things that we've said so far, and I'm sure what's coming in a second is that this overwhelming need and desire for community it's painfully obvious, and to also have that community be a safe haven and a safe space, not just in support groups but also on social media. The people that I interact with on a daily basis, it comes from a few different streams. I am pretty active on my social media. You will see a lot of people post zebras on my page because they're dealing with the same things, and just being able to have a small little quick cheer for each other, it goes a long way in that person's day. I know it goes a long way for me in my days, because some days just stink. They just do. And I'm really frustrated because everybody wants us to just always talk about how we're going to be fine and it's going to be great. Sometimes it's nice to just say, well, today stinks. But you know what? We're going to get it anyway. Let's go. And my experiences with organizations like No Barriers, they help people with and without disabilities overcome their obstacles. And when I say with and without, as it started, it was a lot more focused on people who had very obvious barriers in their life, and then it changed, and the realization has been is that every person, regardless of it being obvious or invisible or mental or personal, they're going to hit a wall at some point in their lives. And we have an obligation to encourage and lift people up instead of stepping on each other and pulling each other down, or besting each other with surgery stories, or, oh, you think you've had a hard throw, think about this. With No Barriers, I've gotten to travel and go to some pretty incredible places, including Nepal, and that trip was significant to me on multiple levels. We took 12 differently abled high school students to Nepal, and in Nepal, if you have a difference or a disability, you're karmatically cursed. You earned it somehow. And so we got to go, a group of the cursed, and travel up mountains, varying different altitudes, eating limited foreign foods. For me, it was almost consistently buckwheat every meal of every day, and high stress and high moving and physical situation, which I'm sure you're thinking, well, what could go wrong? Physically, everything for me went wrong. I struggled a lot on that trip, and it was very obvious, not just to me because I was feeling it, but to the students who I was leading as well. And we all had our differences, and we were all cheering each other on. We had kids with traumatic brain injuries, Tourette's syndrome, CP, deaf, blind, suicide, high anxiety. We had a whole room full of people battling their own obstacles, and we were tackling them one by one, just saying, you know what? We're all broken, we're all weird, we're all hitting this together, let's go. And And we got to start conversations in a place where if you do have some kind of barrier, then you can rub off your bad juju to somebody else. And so we got to break down stereotypes and start conversations in a place where maybe they hadn't even cracked that shell. But more importantly, we got to work as a team to encourage and to help find creative solutions to problems, such as adding bells to the backs of the backpacks for the blind students to be able to follow with their canes so that they could climb independently without having to hold on to somebody at all times. Or for me physically, once you sit on a horse up a mountain for 6 hours and then your body shuts down, to have a team of people helping to massage my legs out of the muscle seizures that I was dealing with at the time, and we were all just a unit. And the social media, the cheering each other on, the being able to talk freely about our differences and the things that we're struggling with, it's so critical and so important. It's also really important to understand that the people on social media who write the nastiest things, the ones that are trying to break each other down, they're seriously struggling with something in their life as well, and this is a response to what's going on in their heart. And so even though people on social media might not agree with you, or they might think that you're a fake, or they might think that you're silly, to still, instead of being hurt, to share love back and to understand that they're battling their own mountains and we don't know what's going on in their life, and it's a serious lack of education. And so that was one of the biggest things that we learned. It's a lack of education. And so we can be strong and educate continuously regardless of how far it goes down.
Yeah.
But those are some of the things that I learned.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thank
I
you.
lost her.
Kendra.
All right.
All right. Okay. Well, Kendra, you talked a lot about business and social guidelines, which are very important for us to be aware of in the EDS community, whether it be EDS or whether it be some other connective tissue disorder or associated situation. So you've been a co-sponsor for this conference for over a year. We've been working really hard.
And we're still here, John.
And we're still working. We aren't over yet. We're going to continue this. So what do you feel these programs have benefited both you and I and our association with other organizations, which are really phenomenal. This is really a collaboration, which we are really pleased to
very proud
to do. So tell us more.
Well, of course, our own organizations have independent missions and visions. And EDS Wellness's mission and vision and why it was founded was because I wanted to fill a niche that wasn't being met. And of course, I have the background in public health, but even if we're researching for a cure, or even if we're finding a gene, people still need help right now. Just like support groups exist, there is a reason for nonprofits to do work that isn't research for a cure or finding a gene. There is other work to be done, and not all organizations can do everything. And I've always had the goal and the idea and want and desire to collaborate and to fill a niche that isn't being met. And the best way to do that was to focus on something that people needed right now and that wasn't being done by other organizations, so that we could all work together and kind of foster our strengths and weaknesses and really provide a depth of resources for our patient population that really was needed. So we focus on restoring function and living well, but with that being said, we just talked about our leadership need, and I said over and over the need for barriers and self-care. And self-care isn't just nutrition and exercise, if you will. It's also knowing all of this and fostering and needs for leadership support. And our leadership and our providers need support, and they need education, and they need training. So While our missions and visions are different, that's essentially the essence of collaboration with other organizations and together to then provide these resources for our leaders so that they can continue helping serve their members and also taking care of themselves, and that they have a breadth of resources from all of us, and that we just basically help come together and really, foster our strengths and weaknesses and provide the services that our member community really needs, and then of course help provide support for the support group leaders to provide to their members. So I think that's just how it all comes together. It doesn't necessarily have to be the exact same mission and vision, but that there are extensions of our mission and vision in different ways when we work together and then provide leadership support. So that's just the way.
Great, thank you. I had a couple more for Dr. Bluestein. This medical community is not helping us out, okay? So I don't want you to bash him, but
I was just
by
gonna
the
say,
way, why is it that our patients, our members, aren't being diagnosed by doctors in the medical community?
So it is very interesting because I, of course, as I think I alluded to, although I didn't go into a lot of detail about it, I had symptoms for many years myself before I had the appropriate diagnosis. And I, like many of other people in this room, figured it out myself, I'm reading about EDS and I'm thinking, this is it. This is what I have, and I know that's happened to a lot of people. I'm also on the faculty at a medical school, and I know that it's very frustrating to a lot of people. They say, well, why aren't medical schools teaching more about these conditions? I think part of the problem is, if you think about it in terms of, like a sphere, so if you think about how much did Dr. Marcus Welby, fictional character, of course, but how much did he have to know? How much was known at that time? And how much is known now? The amount of information has absolutely exploded. And I appreciate getting asked this question because it does allow me the opportunity to mention when I said about credible information. Times have changed dramatically. You can publish articles now, peer-reviewed articles, by paying money. And that does not mean that makes something credible. So for physicians to stay, you could literally have a full-time job, seeing no patients, just trying to read and incorporate a certain relatively small body of literature, actually, because of the amount of things that are published on a daily basis. And just because it's published in a peer-reviewed journal does not mean that it's credible, because I've been contacted, oh, you wrote such and so paper, would you like to publish that in this journal? It will only cost you X number of dollars. And the journal names are very legitimate sounding, so it can be very difficult for, I think it maybe was Maria who was mentioning about, as admin, you have a very important role because you have that admin label next to you. Just be aware that not everything that is peer-reviewed is an actual, valuable, credible piece of medical information. So I guess first of all, I just want to say that it is very difficult in the current cultural environment that we are in. It is really challenging to take care of any chronically ill patient. We have so many regulations, problems with health insurance, and so many limitations. There's so many liability issues, all these issues of prior authorizations, and they've just made it more and more cumbersome to provide care. And these are not, if you break your arm and you go in, you go into the ER, you go into your doctor, your orthopedic surgeon's office, and they can splint it or whatever it is that they do, and that's a well circumscribed thing. But these are, again, as I said, lifelong conditions. It can be very, I'm just going to put it right out there, if you are a relatively healthy person, and I love what Mandy has said several times now about being broken, because I was at a conference last summer, and it basically, for this program that I teach at the medical college, and we talked about how those of us who were doing this training, we were pretty much all, kind of broken ourselves, and that's why we were there for this training, and that's why we got involved in what we were doing. If you're somebody who has never had any problems yourself, and you have somebody come in for an appointment, and they tell you this hurts, that hurts, that hurts, it's really hard to relate to that, you know, and that doesn't make it right, but I think that I mean, I have the opposite problem that, you know, I know what it's like to have this hurt and that hurt and dizzy and, you know, GI and all of that, hives, whatever. So I can definitely relate to all of that and sometimes take too much of that home, I must say. But I think that it's really, really hard for, I think, a lot of people to understand that. And I think that the more a person has been through different things, like, you know, again, like Mandy was saying about being broken, I think the more that they can relate and empathize often.
Yeah.
So it's really challenging. I think that what Andrea was mentioning was so important about providing information for the physicians' offices regarding support groups, because you know, that's the other challenge that we have as physicians. And when I teach medical students, you know, they are so, I teach all the way from the first year to the last year. And they, you know, even in the last year, they're still really bright-eyed, but especially in that first year they are. And everybody that I have met, every single person that I've met, they went into medicine for the right reason. But you end up dealing with health insurance and, you know, all these different, you know, regulations that are involved and everything in it, and it beats you down, and it's very, very challenging. And we like to fix things, and this can't be fixed. EDS cannot be fixed. It has to be managed. So I think that if you provide that information to the doctor's offices, and then they at least have something that they can offer, and at least if they can, I think a lot of times people don't want to make the diagnosis because then what? You know, for example, when I got my diagnosis, I was literally told, this is what you have, but there's nothing that you can do about it. And that is absolutely not true. I have patients come into my office every single day who say, I've been seeing such and so expert in EDS, and they have run out of ideas of things to do with me. And I haven't yet run out of ideas of things to do with anybody. There's always something else that can be tried. So number one, there is hope. Never give up. There is hope. And number two, I would encourage any of my colleagues that if nothing else, if you can, maybe you won't establish the formal diagnosis and actually put it on the person's chart, but you can at least say, you know, this might possibly be an explanation of what's going on. They might not have the time to go through the whole like criteria for hypermobile EDS, or maybe they don't feel comfortable ordering the genetic testing for vascular or classical EDS. But at least if they can say, you know, you might be somewhere on the spectrum of having a hypermobility disorder, and I'm going to share with you this flyer or these business cards or whatever for these support groups. There are other online resources that might be helpful to you. At least then they can feel like they're doing something. So again, really try to make it a win-win. It's hard, I know, because most of us have been poorly served by the medical community. I mean, I have so many patients who say, I have medical PTSD, and a lot of my colleagues think that's crazy, but I do believe that that is a thing, and that is something that that we struggle with. It's very, very challenging. But remember that we want to help you. We really do, but we have all of these constraints. We have incredible constraints on time, the organizations that we may work for. I work for myself. I opened my practice as a completely independent practice because I didn't want anybody else telling me what I could or couldn't do. And after doing locum tenens all over the state of Wisconsin and working for multiple different institutions, I realized that the only way to control your practice is to have your own practice. And so that's why I opened it as an independent practice. But most people don't have that luxury. You know, this, like I said, is my plan B, C, or D, somewhere in there. And so I'm very fortunate because I don't have to worry about putting food on the table anymore. Most people, they have to worry about that. And their organization will tell them, you have to see 20 patients in a day or 25 or whatever. And so they have a lot of restrictions that are placed on them. So again, anything that we can do to make it easier, I don't know how much I answered that question, but
I think you did a good job
Okay.
answering the question.
okay, thank
Can
you.
you be real brief and tell us why don't you take insurance?
Oh, I'd be happy to tell you why I don't. This is probably the most common question
Because that's
that
the
I
most
get.
common
Yes,
question I
this
get.
is the most common question that I get. And I will say exactly what I said 2 weeks ago at the EDS Wisconsin support group leader training that they had, and I got asked the exact same question there. And I said then, and I will say it now, if somebody else can build the type of clinic that is needed in order to serve EDS patients, and hire me to work there, I'll work there for no salary. I'll donate my time. But somebody else has to build the clinic, because that administrative piece I can't really do. I was not able to figure out how to properly care for EDS patients and take insurance. I give them the paperwork to submit to their insurance, but billing insurance is a whole nother complicated ball game. So for me to have people in my office processing insurance payments and things like that in order to just cover the employees' salaries, I don't know how I could even make it work. So I would love to be able to do that, and if somebody can figure out how to make that happen, that would be great. Let me know, and I'll come work there. So,
Fantastic.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. We kind of wore you out. But we miss Kathy over here. So I'm going to talk here first because otherwise no one can hear me. But okay, so you run the Children's Support Group in Dayton, Ohio. And we've had a lot of requests for Children's Support Group. Some people are very, very cautious about it, and understandably so. So tell us a little bit more about the benefits that you've seen for not only the children, but also for the parents when you have these support groups.
So a lot like with the adults, these kids feel lonely. They don't have anyone that's like them. They go to school, they see their friends, they can do things that they can't do. So these support groups really help kids realize that they're not alone in their EDS journey. They create bonds with each other. I've seen teens get together between meetings, which is amazing to see. So it's really starting that bond that we have in our adult groups early on, because that's going to really help with their mental health as they get older as well. Families are able to connect with each other too and talk about issues that they're having with their kids. And it really helps like the non-EDS parent or the parent with EDS that maybe isn't as severe as their kid understand their child better and know what they're going through. That way discussions at home can be a lot more beneficial. They can understand their kid more and know how to support them better.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Did I cover the bases? I really appreciate each of you kind of sharing what you're involved with in your organizations and your support groups and the like. And the doctors, we'll keep after them as best as we can. Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are the needs are great, and definitely people are being underserved. There's no doubt about it. And if other people, I mean, I've kind of spread myself quite thin at this point, but if there's other ways that I can help, I'm happy to. I'm trying to do everything I can to raise awareness. And
Great, thank you. Well, I appreciate the panel. Let's give the panel applause here for all their good questions and their answers, particularly their answers.